started slowly. And that's not what the class is about, but we'll explain that in a minute. We are looking at different things that have been discovered that give us an indication of what life was like, just daily life, not anything. We think about the histories and we think about emperors and pharaohs and things like that. But what was it like for just day by day living? How different or how much the same were they then as they are now, or as we are now, or different, or whatever? So we ended up looking at some Dead Sea Scrolls and some other cave discoveries and last week, and got into a little bit of the garbage dump that was found in Egypt with a bunch of different types of forms that they're still going through, because there are literally hundreds of thousands of these pieces to go through to figure out what they're saying. And it's not anything really dramatic. It's wills and letters and statements and finances and stuff like that. So it gives an indication of what was happening in society. And so I just put this up there because it fits with what's coming next, but I thought it was kind of, I just like Shrek and the donkey. And since we're going to be talking about that, in Egypt, and those things that the letters that were found and the different things, to purchase a donkey was about 150 to 300 drachmas, which is one drachma is 335. So you can do a quick math and realize that it's over $300 drachmas, and that was a lot for an average person to do. Purchasing camel, obviously a lot more. You can see that if you're going east or west in Egypt, camels were probably a better choice, but they're also very expensive. Now, if you wanted a guy to go with you, it's only 2 drachmas to rent, and a camel was 6. But what were you renting it for? Carrying something, carrying product, maybe going from town to town and coming back, so it wasn't long trips. But again, that is some of the things found in these papyrus that was found. Traveling, obvious things, walking, boats on the Nile. We'll look at the cost of that in a few minutes. Chariots for government travel, ships on the Mediterranean. These are all things we're familiar with. Wagons, carts, caravans. Most people traveled in groups, not individually, because of a variety of dangers, and then the armies had the horses and the rich had the horses. Travel on the Nile was about 55 to 60 drachmas. So you're looking at about whatever you figure it out. 1/6 of your yearly salary to get a boat ride to go somewhere. These were not cruise ships. Okay, you just sat on a ship that had all kinds of stuff on it. It had supplies, it had products from different places, and there wasn't a lot of room. These were not huge ships that you might see today, even river cruise ships that you might see in different places of the world today. And they weren't always, I know the Nile was big, and we think of it as one way up and down, but it did spread out near Cairo and then on to Alexandria. So they weren't always going to go where you're going or stop where you wanted to stop. And if you're familiar with the Nile, there are things in the Nile you don't really want to mess with. So the dry season was often good for walking. Again, you could go a lot easier than the rainy season, where floods were common and around that area. So walking was another way that people traveled, but again, it was usually in groups and not individually. Men traveled for births and birthdays, illness and death, religious festivals. We know Israel had 3 major ones. Court hearings. Surprisingly, they had courts. Soldiers traveled, laborers, apprenticed and students. You wanted to learn a trade, you had to travel to where the person could teach you, whatever the trade may be. So again, a lot like we see today. Obviously we have cars, we can get someplace quickly. They went, they had to stay. It wasn't back and forth, in the evening. If you had to go to another town or city, you had to figure out how to stay there and how to make money to stay there. So it wasn't simply just, I'm going to get lessons. There were some things involved in all that.
Well, George, I'm sorry, you said why men, you deliberately chose the word men. Is that generic or what?
No, because I have another slide. Why women traveled. So, obviously, similar things.
I was jumping the gun, right?
Births, pretty obvious. Assisting relatives in pregnancy. Pregnancy was very difficult. It was always good to have family there to follow their husbands. Women often traveled in groups because it was, again, this danger to the situation. And in Egypt, women often conducted business, so there were court hearings and business. So it wasn't just the men that traveled for business. The men, women traveled for these things. They had a responsibility to go wherever the court was and deal with situations. It could be land issues, it could be business issues that they were dealing with. So these are things that we find in there. Last week we looked at a letter that had 2 guys were accused of avoiding taxes and several other things by the Romans, and so you get that idea that there were things like that, or official things that had to be stamped or approved. I don't know if they had to be stamped, but approved, and just again, like today. You build something, you want to add onto your house, you got to get the permits. You got to go to the city hall, you got to get everything in order. And it was just the same back then. So some things do not change. And I put Mary here. This started off as looking at the people around the birth of Christ and how they traveled. And so Luke 1:39-40 is Mary going to Elizabeth. Did she travel by herself? How did she go? And we'll look at maps here a little bit. Straight south, or did she cross the Jordan? And it was a journey that was maybe 8 to 10 days. It wasn't, and the reason isn't, we may be able to do a little obviously cars, but if you walk today out here on a flat area, that's not a problem. You can talk to Marty, you can talk about hiking, right? In the mountains, it's a lot longer than it is on a flat surface, walking along. And so here are some maps of roads in Israel. These are the main road to the left, the Grand Trunk Road is what they call it. It has the way by the sea is another name for it. And it goes along through Gaza and up along the coast, and eventually it goes to Damascus. And so that would be the main road, north-south, people coming, trade routes and things like that, caravans through that area. On the east side, where it says King's Highway, that comes up north-south. Again, Damascus is the one end of it. It connects with other trade routes on that side. But this one, the King's Road, goes through Petra and further south, and it's still in existence today. We've been on the King's Road. It depends on where you are as to how good it is, but we've been on the King's Road. So it's not a 4-lane highway in some parts, but anyway. The one in the middle is, they call it, what do they call it? I can't read it from here. But
Central Ridge Route?
Okay, that's obviously through Samaria and things like that, but it's not mentioned a lot in many places. but it's a route, again, you can see it going south, and we'll get other trade routes in there. So these are just an idea of where people traveled or how they traveled. All the minor roads or all the other lines, they're really not roads per se. They're actually paths. And we'll have some pictures later on of what they look like. They're not, this was not, they didn't build, Israel did not build a lot of roads. Rome built the roads, but they didn't build minor roads in areas like this. They would take care of the Grand Trunk or the Coastal Road and the King's Highway, but they wouldn't be worried about what the road to Jerusalem from Jericho looked like. And it's an interesting travel route. Another, again, Mary and Joseph now going to Bethlehem. And again, same questions. How did they travel? Which way did they go? And a journey of 8 to 10 days. And she's pregnant, so, and we don't know what time of pregnancy. Was it 6 months? Was it 7 months? Was it 9 months? We don't know. Our Christmas story is compacted into a few verses rather than realize this was an ongoing thing. From a broad perspective in Egypt, you can see some of the trade routes, north and south mostly, obviously to Alexandria and on up into the Greek world, or connecting with the Silk Route out of China. So that would be up in the Fertile Crescent where it says Euphrates River. This would be where some of the principal trade routes are. Again, how they wound around. Shipping was involved. Crossing the desert. Again, you don't think of the Saudi Arabia as a place you want to go walking, but they had camels. That's what camels were for, and so they could travel across these areas. And back then, again, going to Petra, it's an interesting experience. You see things that you wouldn't normally think would be there. People living outside in little tents and huts and things like that, and that's the way they live. So some of the oases they may have found in the process. And then I put this one in just for fun and kind of give you an idea of what, again, a north-south route from on the bottom end, that's where you find frankincense and myrrh. And so that went north. You had the Silk Road coming out of China again. The spice routes came across the ocean, or whatever, I forget the name, Persian Gulf area, on into the southern area and went up. And I looked up that empty desert or place or empty quarter. People still go across it, but there's nothing there. It's pretty bad. So, but it's people still travel. Of course, today modern cars you can get across a little faster, but you think about back then, there's probably a place to be avoided. But desert travel again was something that was common. We often think of the Fertile Crescent as that's how people came, but that wasn't always the case. There were other ways to come. Some involved shipping and things like that. So, why do you travel? More trade, more tax money. Why do you trade goods? Alexandria and points south Alexandria would be the port city in Egypt. If you're going south into the interior of Egypt, down to Ethiopia, even further into Africa, you will find that would be a good place to start. The port of Gaza received products from various places in Arabia and on to Rome. Rome was always excited about having that. Asia Minor and the Silk Road from the east. So you can see they cross each other, or what was important. People went along these places, hence the need for taxes, crossing borders and things like that. The spice route through Arabia, I mentioned that already. Petra was one end of the Nabatean kingdom. We don't read about that in Scripture, but it indirectly influences Israel. Rome eventually took it over around 100 or 110 AD. Petra's a fascinating place. In early 1800s, a Englishman or a Frenchman, I'm not sure remember which, heard about a city in the desert, but nobody would take him to it because he was a European. And so he disguised himself as an Arabian and paid a fellow to take him to Petra and found what we know as modern day Petra today. Along with that went a recent, and it's not necessarily a discovery, it's been there for a couple thousand years, but it was unknown. A place called Hedra, and that's part of what it looks like. There are just a bunch of these all around, these types of rock displays. They built tombs in them. A lot of things were found in here. So that's in Saudi Arabia. Obviously, Mecca and Medina are on the southwest side, and no non-Muslims are allowed in that area. But some do apply that to the entire country. However, the northwestern part where this town of Hedra was found, it was along a trade route of peppercorn, ginger root, and I mentioned all that, sugar, cotton, frankincense, and myrrh. So Saudi Arabia is now thinking about opening and have tourists come to this area. And they're starting to build motels. Now, if you have an extra $700 or $800 that you would like to spend the night there, that's sort of the cost right now. You would fly to Riyadh, and that's the capital, and then you would fly in from there to this area. They do have tour guides in English and Arabic. 111 tombs found there, and they're in better condition than the ones found in Petra, which were about 600. It has 7,000 inscriptions, so limited to names, titles, and warnings, which is exciting for archaeologists. And about 100 had dates, which is even more exciting. So you kind of figure out, oh, this is when, and we can kind of date when something was put there. But on the whole, the Nabatean people are very mysterious, and we know a lot about them through Roman and Jewish historians.
Well, George, are we able to tell what kind of warnings were on those tombs? Anybody
There
know?
were some warnings, yes.
Of what
It's a
kind?
good point. There were some. In fact, it was kind of scary for Arabs to go there because there were some serious warnings about dying, curses, as it were. And so they kind of limited how many people went there, which maybe is the reason it was preserved so well. That they didn't get trampled over. But now that archaeologists are interested in it, it's a different story. They're not as concerned about the curses. So, if you watch that, there was a movie, it was back in the 80s or around that time. Just kind of, one of these minor little things, The last part of the scene in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is coming through the canyon, and that's the building you would see. It shows up better on my computer screen than it does there. If you go in the movie, you go inside, and there's a cave and all kinds of things. Okay. Sorry, people. Let me just spoil it. They've gone inside. It's got 3 walls and a ceiling and a floor, and they use modern technology. There's no cave, no hidden passages. It's just a building that was dug into the side of the mountain there. But it's just impressive to see it. This is the night scene that they have a little show that they put on down there. And what's fun is, and again, you can't see it too well, but up in the sky you can actually see the stars. It's just great to look up and see all that. Here's the passageway, to get through there. Sometimes it's wide, sometimes it's narrow, so you go through.
George, where is this? Kind of in Jerusalem somewhere?
No, this is in Jordan.
Jordan, okay, that was, okay.
Southern Jordan.
Okay.
All right, I put this in there for a reason, and again, down at the bottom of the building, if you go down away from the building, you see a sort of a black thing down there. Well, that's a metal grid, and they went digging. They got permission from Jordan. Jordanian archaeologists and American archaeologists started digging in there, and they had used the technology to go over at the LiDAR to see if there was anything there, and they dug down and they had 2 layers of empty graves that they found there. So that was pretty exciting for them to discover that, and then they decided to do the other side. And dug down, and they recorded this one, and they found, again, 2 layers of graves. They found the 12 skeletons and some artifacts, bronze and iron and so forth. So that was pretty exciting to see that. The thing was, this Josh Gates, it's the Discovery Channel, and his program is Expedition Unknown. He was invited to go and film the dig, that particular dig. So it aired on October 9th and 16th, and it was season 14, the first 2 episodes. And it's really fascinating. They go other places to look at other inscriptions and things like that, but primarily when they get into the digging part, especially when they're breaking through, and they show what they found there, and it's really exciting. So now it's they have grids, and you can't go any closer to. We can't go in the building anyway, so you can look from the outside. But it's stuff that now they're going to have to examine, and archaeologists are going to spend some time with. So this is just a little 1 year ago, October 9th and 16th. So 1 year ago this is when this happened. They're still finding stuff. It's just exciting for archaeologists. How much they learn about the Nabateans, it's hard to say. They don't know who these people were. They don't know why they were buried there. And so now, is the treasury building a treasury, like a collection of taxes? Or now they're thinking it may have been a mausoleum. Anyway, some interesting things to occur there. All right, anybody recognize Happy Texas? We're talk about some infrastructure here and some of the things we may find in the ancient world. Persia started the mail service, if you're familiar with the famous postal creed, either rain or snow or dark at night. Well, that's where it comes from. Esther shows 127 provinces in Persia, and writers being sent out with the king's message. And Rome took what they did in Persia and did what Rome does best, expanded it and improved on it. And so the mail route that started in the east was Rome would base it on its road system. And so roads became important for the Roman Empire. And there's your road system. They built a lot of roads over a period of time. The primary purpose was to move legions around quickly. Rome didn't have a lot of legions, so they developed a way they could move from one end to the other. If you think about the revolt in Judea in 66, there was one legion in Israel. They moved one from Egypt, one from Asia Minor, and one from Greece, and got them all there real quick using their road system. And we're not talking 5,000 people. We're probably talking 20, with all the auxiliary troops and all the cavalry and things like that, probably about 20,000 troops moved very rapidly to Israel to deal with that. So you can see the extent of their empire. Mail service, Rome built stations. Oops, I went somewhere and didn't meant to do that. Shouldn't touch things. There we go. Built stations about 20-25 miles apart. Many of these were guarded by Roman soldiers, especially for government messengers and important people. So there's food and rest there, and wagons were often parked there for the bigger stuff and guarded. So thievery may have happened in some places, especially if you're off the beaten track. But if you're around these areas, you didn't want to mess with Roman soldiers. So that was part of the thing. And in one of many Roman roads, different styles. We'll talk about some of the things, but keep this picture in mind. They had curbs and drainage ditches. There were 4 layers, and it was like our interstate system. If you think about looking at how all the roads around Rome, so what do we base our interstate system on? And what was it based on? What was its primary purpose? Move troops from one side of the country to the other side of the country. East, west, north, south, wherever they were, we were going to transfer. Now it's trucking. So especially if you're on I-40. And the other thing is, here, I love the second one from the bottom. They had mile markers. So when you're driving along the interstate or even some highways, see mile markers, guess where that came from. So I just love that idea, thought of that. I don't know how they marked them. I don't know, whether this was mile 14 or which direction, because if you're going east to west, the numbers go down on the interstate, so you know how far you're going. But if you're going west to east, you need to know what the last exit is, and so how many miles there are.
Isn't some of that from where the soldiers would force people to carry their packs and stuff, and so they had their...
No, that could be.
It was part of we force you to go 1 mile, go 2 mile.
I'm not sure that would, that may have been true in, I don't think they did mile markers on some of the roads that we will see in Israel. But yeah, on the main road, if it was running through Judea, they did probably, or wherever they would do that. That might be we're going this way, so this is the mile marker, so that would be
Your service is over here.
right. So yeah, it might fit pretty well. Just an idea of the construction of the Roman road. There's about 4 layers. Now they're not that smooth. A little rough to walk on at times, but and if you're riding, it's going to be a little bouncy because of the type of road it is. Jericho, Jordan is where Charnel and I and Jolene and others went to. This is really an amazing site in Jordan, north of Amman, Jordan, and it's not a giant area, but you look at how they built things, and you just stand in awe of how did they get those things up there, how uniform they are, how much similar they are, and the way they did their work, their stonework is just amazing. And again, they're still finding, you look at the extent of this place, because we walked around for several hours, and when we were there, they were just starting to find some statues that they didn't know were there. And since then, that was in 2020, so since then they found even more stuff. So they're still digging there, and they're still finding stuff. And so it's helping to understand the Roman times, whether it's 1st century or a little later in There were dangers in travel, obviously, thieves and robbers. Several letters from Egypt again reported that donkeys and clothing were stolen. One letter, a husband tells his wife to bring the gold jewelry, but don't wear it on the trip.
All right.
Now, none of you have ever had that problem, right? Okay. Rainy seasons were an issue. If you travel in the rainy season, you face floods. Shipwrecks, obviously, caught in storms. Acts 27. There's accidents. There is a letter that talks about a servant who got a bolting donkey his foot, and he was laid up for several months. Or somebody being stepped on by a horse. And so now you had to find a place to stay and recover from a broken foot or however the injury is. And it could be expensive in the process of doing that. And of course, the proverbial wild animal, which mostly would be Nile crocodiles and then whatever's out in the desert or desert areas, lions and things like that. And you look around today, and again, anybody that goes hiking, anybody, or whether you're in the Rockies or you're in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, it's always fun. You never know what you're going to wake up to walking around out there like a bear or a mountain lion or things like that. And I think there's a few of those around here too, so we have some fun there. Sightseeing was not something that was done much. People weren't that interested in that type of thing. They just lived to survive day to day. There was a case, again, in these letters, or these papyri, that the two brothers were traveled with a man to see the place that they had heard of and thanked him for allowing them to go. Another letter from a son who was upset with his dad for not taking him along. And then there was the culture shock of going someplace totally different. If you haven't ever been to a foreign country outside of Texas, Louisiana, or Oklahoma, you know it can be pretty shocking to go somewhere else. We talk about Jesus marrying Joseph to Egypt, the importance of the wise men and their gifts. Again, frankincense, myrrh, and gold, the most expensive items in the ancient world. So these gifts given to Joseph and Mary were able to sustain them for a period of time in Egypt. So God provided for them. They were not going to go there and have to worry about some place to stay or some place to eat or things like that. Now, whether they walked or took a ship or bought a donkey, that we don't know. More likely they walked. Again, ship travel was a little more expensive in the Mediterranean world, though if you went to Gaza, you could take a ship to Egypt. But there were many Jews in Egypt. Alexandria had a big population. Elephantine Island, which is an island in the Nile River, also had a big group of Jews. Ethiopia, coastal towns, and any number of synagogues. So there were places for them to stay, places where they would be treated well in their travels. Now, here's a road that's going to be pretty popular. We read about it in Luke 24, and there it is. There's your walking road, Brad. And even though it's up high, I think there's a couple of people walking at the top. You may see them walking. It's two people walking along. It's about as wide as it gets. And so you can see, again, no motels or McDonald's or things like that. There are at least 4 roads identified in Scripture. The way of the sea, which is that other name that was given. Isaiah 9 and Matthew 4 mention it. The King's Highway, Numbers 20, that's in Jordan. Straight Street in Damascus, where somebody named Judas lived. And then, often this is how it was defined, the desert road from Jerusalem to Gaza, or the road to Emmaus. These are some of the ways roads were defined. Of course, we all have our humorous country road thing. Go down about 3 miles to a house that was burned down and turn left, and look for a big rock, and next to the rock you turn right, and get all. So that's sort of how they define the desert road or the straight street. I don't know how they got straight free or whether they had a big sign that said something, but that's some of the indications there. Again, I put the map back up to show you the different roads. And again, the minor ones, all the white lines are more like the road to Emmaus. They're not like our paved, like 1960 or whatever they call this thing out there now. And they're not even like our streets on where our houses are. Just one or two people walked along. Here's a famous road, the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, or either way. At the top left is that's about 3,600 feet above sea level, and then you start walking down. And as you can see, it's not a straight walk, even today. And then you go back up, and then you start down again, and you can see how it drops, and then you're up and you're down, and toward the bottom it's a lot more sandy. You're like walking through sand dunes, not hard rock. And then you get to Jericho, which is 800 feet below sea level. So you've dropped about 4,400 feet. Now going down is probably a lot easier than going up, which would mean that it would take a lot longer to go up than down. Today, it's a 4-lane highway, but it's not straight. You wind around going down to Jericho, so it's a fun walk. Here are some pictures of what this road from Jericho to Jerusalem or vice versa looks like. You can kind of get a picture. That's how they walked along. Nice, smooth, right? Oh, that's nothing. There's the road on the right-hand side there. If you don't like heights, it's not a place for you, that's for sure. Very narrow. You can see why, if you meet somebody, we see pictures of trucks and cars meeting on some crazy road, and you have to kind of, the same thing here walking. You might meet somebody and you just hope that they get around them.
Okay, the thing, Wadi, is that,
It's
that
a
little stream?
Yeah, a little stream, creek, brook, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes with water, sometimes with not. Here's another one. This is out of Jerusalem. You can tell stairs where it says ancient road. It says stair. You see the stairs. That's really looks like a fun road too, which I'm not going to walk on.
Any idea where the Good Samaritan would have been along here?
Maybe around here. A little smoother here, but you can see it the switchback. So they had to cut back, and people could hide anywhere along here. You just hide behind rocks and things like that. How wide would it be where the Good Samaritan? It may have been in some area like this, where they could at least work a little bit, beating him up and things like that. But a couple of those other ones, you don't want. I mean, you try to beat somebody up, you might go down the side of the mountain with them. So it's not a pleasant thought in that drive or that walk there. So that's just some of the indication of what people in ancient Israel had to deal with. I guess again, talking with Marty, those would be types of paths you would probably see some of along the way. Well, I always like to thought about about motel places. I was listening to, who's the, one of the four guys that were, redneck comedians. Anyway, Jeff Foxworthy, talking about going to a wedding, and he said, we're gonna stay at the, Motel 6, you know, the real fancy Motel 6 in this little town. Worst place he ever stayed in. We'd have to. Motels back then are places to stay if you were traveling off the beaten path. Again, roads that may not have been involved with Rome were notorious places, being dirty and dangerous. So camping out was one of the better choices. Rome would protect the better places. Congregations would, as they developed, letters could be sent to, or given to someone, and they would travel in town and hand the congregation a letter, and would be welcome. You know, well, so-and-so from Ephesus said, you take care of us. Oh, yeah, you can do that. And synagogues would be the same way. Synagogues are a place to look because of hospitality, and we'll eventually, we'll get that in a few minutes. Bethlehem was Joseph's hometown, so no, there wasn't an inn in Bethlehem. The word doesn't mean motel, it means upper room. So we'll look at houses later on and show that. Middle Eastern hospitality, this covers a broad area. If people were invited in, a meal share, a host was responsible for the guest's safety. To insult a guest was required a formal apology. And this fellow, and I'll just say David Beery, who was a respected Jew in Israel, was invited to a wedding, an Arab wedding came, somebody tried to assassinate him, he fled, they caught the guy and arrested him, but about a week later, 12 Arab elders dressed in white came and asked for forgiveness for not guaranteeing his safety. It was an insult, and then they destroyed the guy's home, the assassin's home. So hospitality is a very serious thing. And we experienced some of that in Jordan, where we were invited into a meal, and the host, who owned the restaurant, was the cook, did not have to do that, but he wanted us to go to Petra that night and enjoy that. So, and we said, well, we're kind of stuck here as far as do we eat or do we go? And he said, well, come early and I'll feed you. Well, he wasn't kidding about feeding. I mean, we got finished with the first course and we were full. And then he brought out the good stuff, meat and all that other, and then dessert after that. So we were treated royally, but that's their hospitality type of thing. We were treated very well in the Middle East that way. That's part of their culture. For Paul, the apostle synagogues became an important part of their activity, obviously. Common bonds found in many places often offered safety, especially early on as the gospel spread, and it opened the way again for the spread of the good news. So those are some of the things involved in that. Roman Empire travel involved traveling from Israel to Egypt or anywhere in the empire is more like traveling from California to Texas. I looked up the idea of passports, or what was required of the traveler, and I like to get in myself, but most of the time they may have had some paperwork, but language, dress, and accents indicated a lot when you were traveling. And so, when I worked at Walmart, usually when somebody came in with a pretty big accent, Scottish or if it was some type of British accent, I'd say, well, what part of the empire are you from? They obviously understood. So I met people from Australia and South Africa and Scotland and England, and we got to talk a little bit about those areas. Sometimes they were interested in talking, sometimes they weren't, but, however, it was fun to do that. So accents become pretty important. Even here here in this country, we listen for accents, and many times we don't necessarily hear them, but sometimes we do. And you can tell, well, you're at least from the Northeast. Or, yeah, dude, I'm from California, however,
You're not
kind
from
of.
here.
Not from here, yeah. So, accents become, part of that. And then coins and jewelry often indicated, where people were from, so, and the weight and things like that. So, travel did occur, again, mostly a lot merchants, caravans and things like that. Citizenship, Paul was born a Roman citizen. The Roman soldier in Jerusalem in Acts bought his citizenship. Conquered people were often given Roman citizenship. Soldiers, if an army surrendered to Rome, one of the things they negotiated was, if you surrender to us, we'll allow you to stay together. And you will become Roman citizens after X amount of years in serving Rome as in the Roman army. And they would accept that. And then Rome would send them to the other side of the empire, away from their culture, obviously, to prevent rebellion. But that was one way Rome used or had more soldiers in their company. And Philippi was a Roman city with all the rights of Rome. I don't know how many Roman special cities. Philippi was given the honor because it sided with Rome in the Civil War, and the Emperor Augustus, they sided on his side, so he blessed them with Philippi became a special city, and he sent his retired soldiers there. And they'd rather have the retired soldiers in Philippi than walking around the streets of Rome. So there were two reasons to do that. One, give them a nice place to live, and two, keep them out of our hair. We don't need them around us. So that was some of their ideas. I'm going fast. I appreciate any questions or comments you want to make. That's fine. I put the pyramids in here just to let you know there are amazing things done in buildings. And Petra, Egypt, even Israel, amazing things that people did in building stuff. There's still mysteries around the pyramids. Rome built aqueducts, and it's Roman concrete is probably the finest that was ever made, and nobody knows who did it. Babylon and their big cities, they knew math and science, and I was watching a program on Egypt. They found what's the weight that they use? A plum weight. They found the plum weight at the bottom, how they measured to make the stones that they built some of the pyramids with. So they knew how to do these things. And we mentioned last week, talked a little bit about reading and writing. I was reading a article that just came out by Niall Ferguson, who's a historian, and he talked about writing over the years or centuries. And I was left with the impression that that there were times many more people knew how to read and write, and then it would fade for whatever reason, and people wouldn't know how to read and write, and it kind of went in silence. And of course, he was talking about today that today kids spend more time, and obviously, if you don't know how to read text messages. I have a hard enough time with LOL. I don't know about some of the other stuff that comes flying across. I have no clue what that means. Or emojis, you get a whole bunch of these emojis. So are we doing well? People don't buy buy as many books, people don't read as much, and so that was some of his concern in that. A picture of several Jewish homes. When you see this one, they're often close together, but not like 200. They would maybe be a group of 4 or 5 homes together, because unlike us today, every one of us, does anybody not have an oven in their home? Right, we all have ovens. Well, back then they shared. They didn't just, they couldn't afford to build a lot of ovens, so they built one oven, and the ladies got together and they worked it together. And we'll talk about this, but remember 2 ladies out in the field grinding? Well, that's what they did. That's how they worked together. And they would make bread, and they would talk to each other, and they would do other things together, because that was their society. They had no choice. That's how they communicated, and that's how they lived. A picture of another house. Again, a storage area, a place for an animal. If you go to Judges 11, remember Japheth made the vow, whatever comes walking out of my house, I'll offer up to God. Well, he was probably expecting that lamb to walk out instead of his daughter. So, we read that as a foolish vow, in the sense it was. He didn't really think it through, but it was really something that animals would come walking out, whatever might have walked out of the house, because they lived there. They were protected that way. They didn't just stay out in the fields. They were protected. Were involved in different things, minor things, milk and wool and things like that. The temple in Jerusalem. This is they built an ancient Jerusalem in Jerusalem, so you can go see what it looked like. It's one of these miniature things you can walk around and see, and so that's sort of what the temple might look like in that time. I got a couple more here. Herod was a builder. The temple was added to. He built Caesarea. There was nothing there. There was no port. There wasn't even any way to build. There was no inlet, nothing. And so he just went out and built a port city in Caesarea with the breakers and the concrete and everything. He just designed and built it. It's an amazing sight. There's pictures of it online. He built Masada, which we'll look at. Sepphoris, which is 4 miles north of Nazareth. 3 temples to Caesar. And all these, of course, required workers. There is Masada. It's amazing. There's one little road that goes up there, and the people control it. And Rome, the only way Rome could fix that, and I think this is the right side, they had to build a big dirt thing up so they could move their battering rams up to hit the wall. And so that's what they did. An engineering feat at both ends. The fact that it was built on top of this thing, and the fact that the Romans had a way to knock it down. Interesting story. And we're going to close with one more. This is for Marty. There's some tools that you may want to get. Give you an idea. Familiar with any of them?
Oh, yeah.
So some of the things that we see in ancient world put together. Woodworking projects included roofs, oil mills, furniture, wagons, chariots, wheels, barges, boats, wooden doors and windows. Wouldn't think about having wooden doors, but towers, storage areas, defensive walls, weapons, bridges, and farm equipment. So a lot of work there. Outdoor work, about 50 denarii a month, and done in populated areas and master craftsmen were trained. There are street level shops, and some in mobile areas, they're more mobile in other areas, and, would work on big projects and stay for months. Stonemasons, built tombs, houses, putting the stones in the right place, stone walls, maybe a secondary occupation for a carpenter, and in, obviously, cities, much more use of stone. And, here is one thing a stonemason may build, an ossuary, a bone box, after a year, in a cave, they can collect the bones, put them in this box, which is, let's see, about 2 feet long, 1 foot wide, and 1 foot high. Some would be decorated with designs, mostly flowers, or geometric signs, and they have literally found about 1,000 wine boxes. And that's what a first century tomb would look like, with the boxes in it. Some had names, some didn't. And stoneware. So, all right, well, we'll stop there. I said that already, so we'll stop there.
Are those what they make jugs out of, or
Make
jugs, like hollow metal?
yeah, they didn't really describe it. They found them in 2023, and they just said stoneware. So I'm assuming there was probably something, that they would make some type of storage container that they would use. Again, 2023 is not that long ago. They're still finding stuff in shops in those areas.
It's like a flower pot, you don't know.
Exciting. Let's have a word of prayer, and thank you, Father, for the time together. Thank you for your blessings, and we're thankful for your word and the ability to understand and to study it and to know a little bit about the people around it. That we always serve you in Jesus' name.